The Trappings of Spiritual Psychosis on today's Oblyron Spirituality. Greetings everyone, I am Oblyron. Thank you for joining me on today's episode where we are going to talk about the trappings of spirituality and how they can sometimes lead us down the road of psychosis. Okay, so let's go over some of the ways in which we could probably become a little bit too obsessed with our spiritual practices. So the first way is when the process becomes more external than internal. And what I mean by that is, and it doesn't matter if it's, becoming obsessed over, let's say, a new crystal or a new tarot deck or even a new spiritual book. It is when we think that spirituality exists outside of us. And so we're always constantly looking for, let's say, a new book or a new trinket or something to basically validate our experience. And all of this stuff is really just about the internal experience. Every single thing that we go over, it's really about cultivating the inner self. And again, it can become very easy to become enamored with all the colorful crystals and all of the artwork of the tarot decks. Yeah, I mean, I own a bunch myself as well, and as well as various oracle decks too. But again, that you can never forget where the power truly comes from. It's no different than, let's say, I'm also a musician too, so it becomes very easy as a guitarist to own a lot of guitars, and it's like, well, how many guitars do you really need? It's kind of along the lines of those. The practice and the power always comes from within, and everything that's around us, all these crystals, tarot decks, books, everything is just really they're tools, but they do not particularly define our spiritual experience. Okay, so another thing that we need to watch out for is spiritual psychosis. And this is probably one of the most alluring and also dangerous phases of our spiritual development, because we have, just to have a spiritual experience is a pretty powerful experience in and of itself. Your body changes physiologically, your neural network begins to change as well. You begin to feel all these different sensations, you think differently, all kinds of things happen. And as those powers begin to grow and as those abilities begin to become more visual and whatnot, and especially as we start to come into contact with spirits and other forms of archetypal consciousness, it is very easy for our egos to also become very inflated. I'm a prime example of this. If you've been following me for any length of time, but there is also this detachment from my spiritual essence, I guess you could say. When I first got all these revelations, excuse me, especially during the quickening of light, when I was new to all this, it was a lot easier to become a lot more self-righteous. It was a lot easier to think that, I had the way or something like that. And I found, especially ironically after my shadow quickening, it's that, it's really about our self-cultivation. Everyone has their own way, and we can never forget that. We can never forget that we are all on our own paths. And that, to me, has been probably the biggest lesson within the past couple of years is truly appreciating not only our own individual sovereignty, but also the sovereignty of others. It almost seems like, the more we go into these spiritual psychoses is when we attract those followers, and that's a pretty dangerous combination. So yeah, it's always good to be aware of spiritual psychosis when it's affecting oneself when you can see it in others. Being able to see it in others is very important. And of course, the more we know ourselves, the more we can see it in others. Okay, so the last thing to watch out for is sometimes the energies just aren't in alignment with our spiritual progression and growth. And so what I mean by that is there have been, or I should say that there are small cycles and then there are larger cycles. A small cycle is like, let's say, a weekly cycle where, maybe we're reading, maybe we're educating ourselves every day, and, we're kind of learning new things about spirituality, or, we're meditating and whatnot. And then there's also the larger cycles. That's what I refer to. In my particular instance, it was the two quickenings that I had, the quickening of light and the quickening of shadow. And those cycles took place over the span of, roughly 8 to 10 years. So, like I said, there are larger cycles. And what I've noticed within the past couple of months, actually not the past couple of months, what I've noticed in the past couple of years, in recent years, maybe about the last 2 or 3 years, is that there has been a lot of people talking about the shadow and shadow work that has been starting to come up. A lot of channels that would never have come up, let's say pre 2020, or let's say around the whole 2012 era type of thing, and we're seeing a lot of these channels pop up, and a lot of people who have these channels, well, they had their spiritual experience in like the early 2010s. So like I said, the 2012 era, 2015 type of years, when everything was still pretty much exploding on the spiritual scene, especially the online spiritual scene. We started to see a lot more YouTube videos pop up about these types of things. And so collectively, we all kind of went through this sort of quickening of light together. At least I believe we did. A lot of other people were having their spiritual experiences, and even people who were not making videos were having spiritual experiences and all this, and it became more commonplace and more accepted. And fast forward to, let's say, the mid 2020s, early 2020s, that was when my quickening of shadow started to kick in, and again, that's when I noticed, a couple years later, more people are talking about the shadow work. So have we all gone from this sort of quickening of light to quickening of shadow collectively? Yeah, I think we probably have. And I think it's also probably culminating, or it's coming to a head this year too. Some other people that I follow, they're announcing on their channels, they're like, I don't know if I'm going to be doing videos anymore, or things like that. It's really interesting how a lot of people are kind of changing courses, especially with this year being the year of the fire horse. Everyone was anticipating this sort of very productive, very, very, sort of let's push forward type of energy. And now everyone seems to be kind of a bit, they seem to be stuck in neutral. I know even myself this year, I've cut back a little bit on the content right now. I've just been creating long form content. There's some other reasons. I'll probably explain it. I'll probably not. But yeah, it's been an interesting experience. The past couple of years with all these energies, it seems like the spiritual community as a whole is kind of like, it's kind of like going through this like hangover almost, and it'll be really interesting to see what happens in the upcoming months and possibly upcoming years, because everyone seems to be sort of at this impasse, this sort of crossroads. So yeah, like I said, sometimes the energies of the times we can't go against the ocean. We can't swim against the current. So just be aware of that. And in those times when we do find it to be harder to swim against the current, well, maybe it's time to take a step back and to just reflect on what we've learned. We don't always have to exponentially grow. Spiritual practices are just that too. They're practices. They're daily practices. They're daily practices in mindfulness, or daily practices in things which have, existed for, as long as humans have been around, to get our minds to be more focused and aware, and again, mindful of our surroundings, compassionate, all these different things. Okay, so I think I'm going to call it there for now. If you've resonated with today's message, then feel free to leave a like, subscribe, or a comment, and let us all know how you've resonated with today's message. Maybe certain topics you've experienced too, maybe not. Maybe you have a completely different perspective. It'd be great to hear from you. If you're interested in additional content, then feel free to check out the Discord. The link is in the description. There's also guided meditations as well as topic forums, and that's where I also offer all of my services and coaching. So thanks again for joining us today, and now we shall close with the chant of Oblyron. Amde sote, amde Oblyron, amde sote, amde Oblyron.